seat in Denver, and I connected via Skype, and she's going to chat any questions. This is really section for you, in Denver, and then again, as well. That way you guys can do your broader community. If you're sitting in the back, I've got a favor to ask you. If you're sitting in the back, you move up front. It's just a way to be respectful of people on stage, so you grab closer to them, so they can engage with you better. This is a general point of shows and classes and things like it's true. She's actually like the nicest. If you know anybody who's still wandering around the booster space and they're still in sleep, please go poke them and bring them downstairs. We'll begin shortly. Well, do we have any viewers? How do we know?
Two.
Two. Amazing. Alright, you guys. We're going to do an official start now. How's everybody doing this lovely Friday afternoon? Cool. Okay. To my left is the lovely Juanita. She is a PhD candidate, so she knows about studying hard. She's also a licensed counselor, so she knows about healing and how to deal with them. So we're really happy to have her today. We know that mental health is a really big issue in the Asian community and for creators in general. We're really excited to be streaming live to Dime Denver and Dime Online right now, and also to be recording this so that you can access it later. Switzerland audio. I feel like 55. Okay.
So I don't know.
Because like some residual sound from the audience, but nothing from her microphone.
That's weird.
But can you hear anything?
Nothing out of here. But when I plug it, like I said, when I plug it in there, it's coming through because this is the audio channel.
So it's got to be like a that to that.
Yeah. Because there's. I don't know, I was trying to get rid of the reverb. So it's like,
what you all do that require you all to tap into a deeper level of emotion than someone who is not a musician at all. Because music is what you feel. That's how you produce what you do. Is based on how you feel. I have not met one artist who have came up with something that they just pulled out of the sky and they didn't have a personal attachment to, whether it be them themselves or somebody that they know or an account that they had to remember or an experience. I haven't met anyone who just said, yeah, I wrote this song just because it sounded nice. It's always been connected to something personal. So the list goes on. So, I mean, when I was doing my research about musicians and mental health, I found all of these people. You have Adele on here, Sia on here, Justin Bieber, Mac Miller, Amy Winehouse. I mean, and it goes, I just couldn't fit them all on this page, but this visual just shows you that it doesn't matter what your status is. You can be a celebrity, you can be a stay-at-home mom, you can be a 12-year-old kid. Mental health issues do not attach themselves to status. Anybody can experience these kinds of issues. So let's go over some terms, because if we know the terminology, then we can follow the conversation, right? So mental health is a person's condition with regard to their psychological, social, and emotional well-being. So it's your ability to cope with stress, because that's what life brings. And the stress has a significant impact on how we function. So how we're able to process it, cope with it, and deal with it, that is what determines our mental health overall. Wellness is an active process of becoming aware of and making choices towards a healthy and fulfilling life. So the key word in this definition is process. Wellness is a process. It's something that you have to actively work towards every single day when you wake up. For example, when I woke up this morning, I wasn't really in the best of spirits, to be quite honest. I really wasn't. And so I woke up and I said, you know what? Today is going to be a good day. I have something to do. I'm going to die. And so I have to get myself together. I'm not going to let my emotions and how I feel determine how this day is going to be. I am going to set the tone today. Today, when I go to bed at night, I'm going to be proud for what I've done, and I'm going to make sure that I keep reinforcing positivity throughout my day. So just like I'm talking to you all right now, this is how I was talking to myself this morning when I woke up. It's called self-talk, self-coaching. You have to coach yourself out of negative moods a lot of the time, because if you wait for it to pass, it won't pass. You have to actively get yourself out of a negative mind state so that you can function and do the things that you need to do. And I'm going to have to do the same thing tomorrow, the same thing after that, especially because I'll be off of spring break next week. I'll be back in classes again. Classes are stressful. So I know that the stress that's going to be coming, I'm going to have to make sure that I put myself in a position to remain positive. So it's more than just, when people think of wellness, they think of physical wellness, like I'm well, I'm feeling physically well. Wellness is not just about not being sick. It's actually, like I said, a daily process about change. Wellness is about change. It's not about just your physical well-being. It's about what's going on internally and the things that you need to do and adjust in your life so that internally, in your heart and in your spirit and your soul, you can be okay. Because a lot of times the research has shown that when the inside is not okay, it can manifest in somatic physical symptoms. Another example, I know that school has really stressed me out since I've been in it. But I started realizing not too long ago that I started getting like back pain and like neck pain, physical pain. And I'm like, I haven't done any heavy lifting. I sleep okay. Like, where's all this back pain coming from? Stress. Because stress can pile up in your body if you're not dealing with it well, and it can manifest in physical aches and pains or sicknesses. So it's very important to make sure that your inside is okay, because that can actually help with what is seen on the outside. Self-care. Self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during times of stress. Self-care is very, 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 very important. Me and Frankie were actually talking about self-care earlier, and I think a lot of people just graze over this because they think that they don't have time. I mean, we're all busy, okay? But if you're waiting for a period to take care of yourself, a lot of times that period take care of you. I mean, think about the roles that you all are in. You all are doing more than one thing every day. You know what I mean? You're a friend, you're a daughter, you're a sister, you're an employee, you're a student, you're a cousin, you're this, you're a volunteer, you're that. I mean, you have to think about how many hats you actually wear a day. Just take a minute and think about all that you do a day. I wish we could have like a life exercise where two people can just switch lives for a day and really just walk 24 hours in their shoes. I mean, we make it look so easy in our respective roles that no one really completely understands. But if somebody else was in your shoes, they wouldn't be able to handle or shoulder what you do. But I think it's important for us to take time at the end of each day or at the, after a couple days to just sit and think about everything that you've done. And first of all, applaud yourself because not everybody can do what you're doing every day. I know you make it look flawless, but you know better than anyone that it is not a flawless process to get up and do, what you do every day. So when you think and you just reflect on how many things you've accomplished, how many things that you've done, it actually lets you know why you need to take care of yourself more. Because if you don't take care of yourself, all those roles and all those hats are going to fall to the ground because you're not going to be any good to anyone if you're not good to yourself. One thing about self-care is people think that they don't have time for it because it has to be something extravagant. Oh, I don't have money to take a cruise. I can't afford a massage. You don't have to do any of that. Self-care can just mean taking a nap for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? It can be simple things like, going out and getting your favorite dessert after school. Or, it's like, for example, yesterday I was in the library for 5 hours straight doing research for this and some other homework. And after I got my presentation done, I took a Facebook break for about 20 minutes. And then I was good to go and I finished up the paper. And after I finished that paper, I said, you know what, I want a chalupa. And so I went to Taco Bell and got me a chalupa and went home and watched Netflix and went to sleep. That was my self-care. No one can tell you what's good self-care and what's not that self-care. It's just get a taco. Well, for me, eating and sleeping are two things that I don't do at the same time or every day. So whenever I get a chance to do it, I'm full of joy. Now that may not be no big thing to you, but to me, it's everything. Now, once I get some more money, maybe we can talk about doing some more stuff. But all I can afford is things to do. So I'm trying to do that. But it's just very, very important to do something for yourself every day. Like I said, maybe it's getting 10 more minutes of sleep, or maybe stopping homework 15 minutes earlier so that you can get some sleep for the next day, or cooking yourself a meal, or maybe getting a massage, or saving up for one, or going out with friends versus being a workaholic. There's so many things that you do to take care of yourself. Maybe going to see a counselor. That's another way that you can take care of yourself. Not dealing with all that you have to deal with. We talk about all these hats. You know what I mean? You can't do everything on your own, including processing your own thoughts and problems. So maybe talking with someone that you trust, whether it be a confidant, a best friend, or a counselor, getting some things out of you, out of that internal, making it external. That way you can lighten the load of your own spirit by getting some of these feelings and things off of you and somebody helping you process them. Maybe that's a way, taking care of yourself. Stigma is a mark of disgrace, a sense of shame that's associated with particular circumstance, quality, or person. So when we're talking about mental health, there's a stigma. Society portrays mental health, and there's one word that people feel and normally say when they think about mental health and why they don't want to look into it themselves. Does anyone know what that word possibly is? Right. A lot of people do not want to look into their own mental health or talk to professionals because they feel as though that means that they are crazy.
Yeah. I think it's the most obvious thing. Thank you, Ari, so you can hear me.
As a licensed professional counselor, mental health professional, and a person who has been in counseling. I've been a client. I've been the counselor and I've been a client. I can tell you that crazy has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. This is about you doing what you need to do so that you can be in a better state. To me, mental health is about discovering your strength It's about redefining your identity. It's about getting the toxicity out of your life. It's about allowing someone to help you see things clearly. And if for somebody else, if that's what you think crazy is, then I'll be crazy all day. How about that? Because mental health is about not caring about what someone else has to say about you being a better you. You know what I mean? So now that we have the terms, we can continue the conversation. So what I want to know from you all is, what are your thoughts about musicians and mental health? Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. So there's a lot, I saw a lot of head nodding and agreeing. Do a lot of people feel that way? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Denver. I hope you can hear me. Okay. But yeah, when I was doing a lot of this research about music and mental health, that's one thing that I saw that was like a myth, that musicians always have to be sad to create their best work. And according to Pharrell and Happy Feet, I don't think that that's completely true. But you said you feel as though it actually inhibits the process. Okay. How about others? What are your thoughts about musicians and their mental health? Yes. Yeah. Can you speak to that a little bit more about all of the different things that you just mentioned? Like what goes into the career? Mm-hmm. 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 And I'm glad you kind of thickened that out for me because, like I said, you all are educating me because I am not. Okay? I'm not a musician at all. But that's why I'm glad that we have this mutual learning experience because just as you all are learning from me, you know, I am learning from you and I see you. You know, I see you up in front. But I'm glad you spoke to that because the research that I was looking up yesterday, I saw so many articles and I read so much literature about how musicians are depressed by those very same things because it's not a clear layout as to how am I going to transition into the music business? Like just because I get all of my lessons done, I've learned that, you know, I have this talent, you know, I've gotten this degree or I've gotten here, now what? Like you said, does that mean I'm a superstar now or am I going to start touring or what kind of music am I going to do versus someone who's not a musician to where it's pretty much kind of laid out. Like this is the job that you're going to have. You're going to apply here. This is your role. These are the requirements. This is what you're going to expect to make. And it's pretty much laid out. For a musician, I don't think from what I've read and from what I've heard, it's kind of not like that. You're kind of not going to know until you're in it. And even when you're in it, because we've seen a lot of musicians who's been in the game for a little bit and get taken advantage of. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the documentaries and biopics of like TLC and like New Edition and stuff like that, but they were taken advantage of by people. And as you know, especially with TLC, when I saw all of that, they were winning all of these awards. They were on the road. They were doing this, not getting paid like they should, didn't know, accountants taken advantage of. There's a lot of musicians who've been in the game for years and still didn't get to the point where they feel as though they should have gotten, because you just don't know, versus somebody in a job that has nothing to do with music. You pretty much know where your money is because you're handling it. You know what kind of job you're gonna have. You know what this job is gonna turn into as far as retirement, when you're gonna retire. And for musicians, it's just not that clear. And that could be very, it can provoke a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. And if things are not necessarily going the way that you hoped, it could be depressing, you know, in a way, especially because you're getting told no a lot and getting turned down for certain opportunities. And I think musicians and artists are kind of in this world of being told no a little bit more than someone who is not, you know, in that field, because you all are going for various opportunities versus someone who is just going for maybe a particular job. You know, so I definitely wanted to understand that from your all's perspective. Yes.
You were asking about musicians and, you know, like mental health and everything. I don't know. I just think, like, if you look back, some of the most genius, you know, musicians, some of the most genius and musician performers were like really tortured souls, tortured artists, and I think for me, being a person that's had a pretty troubled life myself, sometimes I wonder if I didn't have so much tumult in my life, if I didn't have so many, you know, things going on, would I be as inspired? Would I be the same, you know, the same artist, have the same message to represent that I have now? And so I think it's really interesting how much, you know, creativity can be intertwined with mental health, and sometimes, you know, to our own detriment, the mental health can be, but it can also inspire, you know, amazing art. So it's just interesting, you know, when you look at a lot of figures who have, you know, died a kind of like a tortured death as artists, just, you know, like how their mental health played a big part in inspiring their artistry and in their demise. So. And
I think when you speak to that, because we know of these musicians who we have heard living these difficult lives, like Michael Jackson, for example. But when you think about, because we don't know what all went on in his life, but the art, even if he did have a very, very, very difficult life, music was an outlet. Michael Jackson is like, he inspires me. Like, he's the greatest artist of all time in my eyes. And if someone is going through a difficult situation like he may have went through, to produce the things that he produced out of pain, if that's what he was feeling, I think is a way to look at how people use pain to produce great things. Because the things in their life, they may not be able to change, but what you can change is what you produce. You know what I mean? What you do have control over is the product. And so I think that's just a really cool thing about artists in general, is that you take what you experience and you turn it into something that you are proud of and happy with, something that's an outlet for you, even though everything that it came from you really can't control or change, but you can you know, control the product. And so that's why I think we see a lot of artists who do live these tortured lives, but they come out with these great things, because I think they know, this is what I can do. This is what I can handle in my hands. I can control this. The way I grew up, my family, fame, I can't necessarily control that, but I love what I do. I love the work. And so that's, you know, what I'm gonna focus on. So that's actually a good point. So what are your thoughts about your own mental health?
Juanita, we've actually got some questions. I'm holding a mic now because we want to make it easier for everybody to hear. I just want to really quick echo something on that point. Is part of why Juanita's here today is because people also tend to romanticize mental illness within the musicians community, where we hear this thing about tortured artists and all that stuff. But it's really a chicken and the egg thing, like you said, Perry, where it's like, many of us maybe come to music because it's a healing mechanism. It's not that we're creating music, like people are creating music because they're tortured or need to be tortured to create the music. It's just that we come to creative pursuits because there are things going on that are tumultuous, and to create, so to kind of just echo to what JB said, that it might be some people create in spite of their mental illness or in spite of what's going on in their lives rather than because of it,
Yep.
or as a coping mechanism. So I didn't want today to, it's just an issue where many people tend to think that you have to be mentally ill to create really great work. But most people who are creating great work and are mentally ill are doing it as part of their healing process, and are tending to like work through those issues. So yeah, we do have like a couple questions. Is it okay if we jump around
Sure,
with people
absolutely.
who have a lot to say? Okay, so we'll do Isaiah, Lane, Arande, and then we'll go up here.
Okay, I wanted to talk about how artists are idolized and put on a pedestal to where sometimes, and some artists might feel like they can't afford to, you know, have or look into stuff like that because they're afraid of people finding out, and after they find out, they not like them or they get talked about, and that affects their careers and would internally affect their music and their bread and butter and stuff like that.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that some musicians don't want to look into help with mental health because of how it might affect, you know, their career. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and like, for example, Demi Lovato, the stress that she went through, she didn't full on just go out and go to like a therapist because maybe she didn't want paparazzi or people to see him. Oh, she's at it again, and the stress of the work ended up having her, played a part in her relapsing and stuff, and affected her mentally. And just not just with her, it's like with a lot of other artists I know, they think if I go to a therapist, it will affect my music in a negative way, and people will talk about me, or just thinking of stuff would not go good if people see that I am hurting outside of a song that I might write.
And I think you speak to a point about the celebrity status, because I think it's harder for celebrities to actually, I mean, even though celebrities are now becoming more open about their mental health, and because of they're using their platforms to be transparent, it's encouraging other people to actually not be afraid of looking into their mental health. But when you speak about Demi Lovato, I think it got to a point where she no longer, in my opinion, no longer cared about how these mental health issues would affect her career, because the issues were already affecting her career without her saying that she was going through a problem. Like, she was canceling shows, she was showing up intoxicated to things, she wasn't on her A game, and people knew that and can see that. Without her saying that she was going through something, her issues were speaking through her behavior. So it got to a point where I think she just said, you know what, people are gonna think what they're gonna think, because the thing is that people are gonna talk anyway. It doesn't matter if you're doing well, it doesn't matter if you're doing bad, it doesn't matter if you're doing okay. People are always gonna have an opinion about what you do and what you don't do. Even if you're doing well, it's not well enough. And even if you're doing bad, it's like worse. So it's like, that's why I think even with celebrities and just normal everyday people, that's why you have to get to a place in yourself where another person's opinion of you does not matter. It's about what you think, you know, of you. Because at the end of the day, a career is a career, but if you are no good at the end of the day, how are you supposed to perform in that career or in that position? So you have to get to a place where it's like, you know what, it's me over my career. Because if I choose my career over me, it might destroy me if I don't handle these, you know, these issues properly. And with everything that comes with fame, it's very important to be on your A game, because fame is a whole nother monster in itself. Yes.
Not a question, a comment. I think a person can be like completely healthy, but over time they can develop mental illness because they're stressing out, like, I gotta put out another album, or I need new music to drop, or like my label telling me I need to hurry up and do this. Not just with celebrities, but with like us as musicians too, because if we want to put something out and it's not going our way, we can like get stressed out, and I feel like you develop like mental illness because you're so worried about, like, I need to put it out, people need to hear this.
And that speaks to a good point too. You know, and it just shows that everybody experiences mental health issues differently. Stress is something that you can feel every day depending on the situation. Like you said, I got a deadline to meet, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to meet it. That doesn't necessarily tie to any childhood trauma or past experience. That has something to do with what is going on right now. So mental health, depending on what's going on, can look different, you know, from person to person. For one person, it might be, my mental health is what's going on with me today and everything that I got to do, and I'm not coping with this stress very well. For another person, it could be, you know, I'm stressed out because that's how I've always been. You know, I've always been an anxious person. So now with these deadlines, it's just, you know, kind of reinforcing feelings that I've always had. So every person is different, and because every person is different, every mental health issue that they might experience will also be different. So I'm glad you brought that up. Mm-hmm.
How are you today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm grateful to see you again and have you here again. I was just going to mention that my thought about my mental health as a musician, it's like I got my regular day-to-day problems, and then I got my musical problems. And I feel like I don't think I'm necessarily only speaking for myself with this, but I kind of like dealing with my regular problems are kind of like enough already, and then with me coming out with the EP, me trying to figure out every step behind promoting my music, my brand, my artistry, trying to get my message to people who I really feel need it. You know, like I just feel like it's just two sets of stress colliding and then coming back to me and then pouncing on my shoulders, which is like kind of causing me to be suppressive and walk around with a weird kind of energy aura around me. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen it happen. Like I've seen it even today. Like it's just stress floating around the building. Like it's people that's all right. You know, it's people that's good, and then it's the gray area people that's just kind of like not feeling it or like confused about how to feel and I don't really know how to deal with what they're going through, and it's just kind of naturally coming out, you know, like it's just kind of naturally suppressing you and just taking over your day. And so
it's a lot.
I just, you know, I just kind of feel like you know, somebody actually advised me to talk to a counselor, and I agree with what you said. Like sometimes when you think about, oh, maybe I need a counselor, you subconsciously think like, oh snap, maybe I got something going on, but it's perfectly okay. I just want to know like if I'm the only one. I know I'm not the only one, but like, am I the only one who feel like my regular problems and my musical problems kind of like sometimes collide and like kind of like it feel like a weight jacket on me, and it just kind of naturally comes out like.
And I'm glad you put it that way. And you said something about if you look to see a counselor, does that mean I got something going on? That's exactly what it means. And that means that you're aware that there's something bigger than you that you can't process on your own. So I'm kind of glad that we had these discussions. And I know we started kind of late, so I'm going to move forward so that you all can get out on time. But thank you so much for this feedback, because it's kind of letting me know what you all are feeling in everyday life in the positions that you have as musicians. So like I said, I did some research, and I found that musicians are three times more likely to attend therapy when compared to the general workforce. So this was a study done in 2016 in Norway. So the musicians there, they found, were 3 times more likely to start going to therapy versus someone who was not a musician. I also looked up an article that talked about stress and rumination. And rumination is just an intense reflection. You're constantly repeating something that's happened. You're thinking about it in depth, and you can just constantly reflect on it, and it's kind of like repeating in your mind. So stress and rumination can cause musicians to experience depression and negative health outcomes. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. We already talked about the problem, you know what I mean? And it's about mental health and about the way that we look at it. We also talked about how to understand it. So you all kind of told me about how you feel about mental health and music as far as what we've seen in the world and what you see in yourself. But let's talk about some solutions. And I think we kind of started to touch on it with you when you were saying, you know, if I have to go see a counselor, does that mean something going on? That means that you're aware. You are aware that something is going on with me right now that I cannot handle on my own, and maybe I need to talk to somebody else. So when you're thinking about these things and you're processing, you have to say, like, let's just be real. When life happens, what do you feel? What do your actions look like? What are you thinking? Who do you talk to? Where do you go? These are questions that you need to reflect on. Maybe not in that immediate moment, but when you take time to think, I mean, just thinking about it now, when you get mad, when you get sad, when you get scared, what do you feel? What do your actions look like? What do you do? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? Is it the wrong person that you're talking to? Are you running to a familiar source that may not be good for you, or that is toxic? Or are you just distracting yourself, avoiding? Like, what are you doing? Like, these are things that are making you more aware of what's going on presently with you. So I know that this font is like super small, but what this is basically talking about is sitting in your emotions versus substituting them. And so what I tell people is that when you feel something, don't be so quick to hurry up and shut it down. Let yourself feel it. For example, being completely transparent, yesterday I was in the library and I had a very tearful moment about something that I was thinking about. And I just sat in it. I just sat there. I stopped what I was working on and I said, you know what, and I'm talking to myself out loud, self-coaching, positive self-talk, and I said, you know what, Juanita, baby girl, we just gonna sit with this for a second because the moment is gonna pass. I know it hurts, but we just gonna sit in it for a minute. And I just sat there for about 5 to 6 minutes. And it did eventually pass, took my Facebook break, got back to work. So giving yourself permission to feel something is number one. It's not wrong to feel angry. It's not wrong to feel sad. It's not wrong. It's an emotion. It's not wrong to feel frustrated. Just let yourself feel something. Give yourself that permission. And then after you feel something, face the trigger. What caused that? What was the situation that caused you to feel this way? You have to admit that something is wrong. Once you find out what you feel, what's wrong about this situation and how can I make it right? And then you release the pressure. I call it emotional vomiting sometimes. Talk to your friends. Talk to somebody about how you feel. A lot of this is like venting. I went to my cousin one day and I told her, I walked in her apartment, just barged in, and I said, T, look, this is what happened. This is what I'm feeling right now. I can't believe this, da-da-da-da-da. And she's like, okay. She was like making cookies or something like that, and she's like, okay. But I just needed to get that out. And once I got it out, I kind of told her the background of what's going on. Give yourself a chance to think and reflect on what just happened and the deeper meaning, because there's always a deeper meaning to what we feel. It's just a lot of times people stay on the surface, maybe because they don't know how to go in depth, and that's what counselors do. Our job is to help you go deeper than the surface so that you can understand the bigger picture behind what you're feeling, because it's always like a tip of the iceberg type of thing. What you think you're experiencing and feeling is all the way up here, but under the little tip of the iceberg is this big old mountain of ice that you need to deconstruct so that you can better understand what's contributing to your overall emotions right now. That means that you have an increased awareness once you do that, because counselors help you to emotionally identify and label what you're feeling so that you can better understand your thoughts and behaviors. And once you do that, that means that change is inevitable, because now you know what's going on. Now you know why. Now you know the reasons, and now you know what to do so that you can change things and make them better. When you substitute, people often numb themselves out. They run away from the problem. They deny, I'm good, I'm fine, ain't nothing going on. They bottle things up. They stay on the surface. They are not aware of how they really feel, and then they just stay the same, or they become worse. So it's just very important to make sure that once you feel something, just let yourself feel it. It's about what you do after you feel that determines the outcome. People get angry, you can't punch somebody in the face. But if you get angry and then you decide to talk to somebody about it so that you don't punch somebody in the face, then that's a good thing. So here's some resources that I wanted to give you all. So the Detroit Wayne Mental Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority is a good way to look up some mental health resources in Detroit. I have their website up there as well as their phone number. I checked out the website yesterday. You can give them a call. If they don't have the service that you're looking for, they can connect you with someone who is better fit for your needs. Also, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that's something that you can Google, but it's very, very helpful just in case you are in a crisis, you are not having safe thoughts about yourself, you can connect to someone who can connect you to some resources. Psychology Today is also a good resource because it can help you find a therapist based on different criteria that you can filter through. So type of problem, your zip code, type of insurance that you have. I've used Psychology Today. I've referred it to my clients. It's a very easy fingertip resource to find the counselor that you're looking for, reading through profiles and seeing what would be best suited for your needs. And Oakland University has a counseling center, the SEHS Counseling Center that's in Rochester. I wanted to make sure that I offered a resource that was local, but also another resource that I know can be helpful for those who are in that area. But the counseling center there is actually free. So you don't have to pay for services at all. You'll be receiving services from master's level counselors in training. So if you are in that area or can get to that area, that is a free resource. So I definitely encourage you all to look those up. Those would be helpful for you. And that is actually the end of my presentation. I skipped some of the discussion questions because I wanted to make sure that there was time enough for any of the questions that you all had or anyone from Denver. I wanted to leave a few minutes so that I can address anything that you all had on your minds.
Hey, Juanita, I just want a quick comment. Will you email me the slides so I can email them to everyone?
Absolutely.
Cool. I will send those out to you guys so that you can have those resources. I know there were a couple questions before we moved on. So did either of you get your questions answered? Do you still want questions? Okay. So we'll go to Jimmy.
So I was wondering what you do to deal with problems that are like something that you can't solve, like something that's out of your control, or something that talking about it makes you feel worse.
That's challenging. So a problem that you can't change, but when you talk about it, it makes you feel worse. So, two things about that. Even when you're talking about it, it might make you feel worse, but talking about it gets it out of your internal. It brings it to the external, it gets it out of you. So that's still actually a good thing, even though it's making you feel worse, because then you can process, why is this making me feel worse when I talk about it? Every time I talk about this thing, it makes me feel bad, because what people will do is they will just say, you know what, I'm just not gonna talk about it. I don't want to feel worse, so I'm not going to talk about it. But that means you keep it bottled up. And what you want to do is get it out into the forefront and face that trigger. Why is it that every time I talk about this, I start to feel like this? So maybe the solution is talking to someone who can help you dissect that and get to the deeper meaning of that feeling of feeling worse. The second part is we just have to accept it. This thing that has happened that I cannot control, I have to accept that I cannot control it, and I have to accept that it's making me feel that way, but I'm determined to understand it so that I can dismember it so that it doesn't control my life. So that the next time I talk about it, I don't feel worse. I talk about it as just something that happened to me or something that happened. You want to take the power away from that situation by talking about it more, because the more you talk about it and the more you understand it, the more you desensitize it and you take your power back from the situation.
And then another thing I wanted to ask, I guess it's not a specific question, but
Thanks.
you were talking about solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my friend here were talking about solutions among popular musicians that aren't so great. Like we brought up, like we were thinking about Kurt Cobain, you know?
Yeah.
So one thing that I think is interesting, I'll say, is that in today's day and age, I feel like there's a lot of over-prescribed prescription medications to deal with these things. And we were thinking like if Van Gogh had been on antidepressants, we probably wouldn't have gotten Starry Night. So
Maybe,
I just wanted
right.
some of your perspective on, I guess, the substance issue and overprescription in mental health.
Well, I'm glad that you touched on the substance abuse, because in my research that was linked to a lot of behaviors of some, musicians in order to help them deal with their mental health issues. But I think that when you're talking about substance abuse and then you're talking about prescription medication, those are two completely different things. So when you're talking about substance abuse, of course, substance abuse is a way to avoid feeling. It's a way to avoid talking about the problem. It's a way of numbing out, putting yourself in an alternative way of thinking so that you don't have to think about what hurts. And that's not a good solution to dealing with any problem. But when you're talking about prescription medication and being overly prescribed that is a situation where you have to make sure that you're informed about the meds that you're on and what they are for. Some people do need medication, but I think in isolation, probably not. It's always recommended to take things in combination, so medication along with counseling, just like diet and exercise. You can diet or exercise, but you'll get the best outcome if you do them together. So as far as prescription meds, I don't think they're necessarily bad. I just think that you need to be well informed if that's the route that you're going to take, because some people actually do need them. But if you're going to develop a dependency on them, being overly prescribed or taking more on than you know you probably need to, or making a situation a lot more serious so that you can get more medication, then that turns into a substance abuse issue, which is not going to help you solve your problem. So I think that you just need to be aware of why you would want to go this route, being informed of what medications are out there and what they're for, making sure you're talking to a professional, so a psychiatrist or your doctor, about what you want to do, and just making sure that you're not taking advantage and developing a dependency issue, which is going to lead into a substance abuse issue, which is going to lead into your issues not being resolved at all.
I also kind of want to jump in, JV, for you, because you were like, well, would we have gotten Starry Night if he had taken antidepressants? We don't know, but we probably would have gotten more paintings had he not died by suicide. So it's one of those things that if you need your medications, you need them. And there's a stigma around medications, and a lot of people try to act like you can, exercise away or get, or you can meditate away clinical depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder. That's, if you have a medical issue that is affecting your brain, it's a medical issue. And I just, in case anybody in this room does take meds and is, feeling a way about it, that's like what you need to do. That's what you need to do. And if it's keeping you alive, that is a great thing. Not to like jab at you. I just wanted to make that point clear that like, take your meds if you need to take your meds.
No, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a stigma with people who take medication that's prescribed by a psychiatrist. There's a stigma with that. But again, it's about, this is what I have to do for me. You may not approve, you may think whatever, but it keeps me feeling good and positive, and I get to, function. So if you have a problem with it, then that's your problem. So I'm glad that you actually brought that up, Allie.
I think we're wrapping it up because we've got our department heads kind of rolling down and trying to do department meetings.
Yep.
Are there any like super burning questions, I guess, before we leave? I know Juanita usually hang out for a couple minutes afterwards, so if you want to chat with her, she's very friendly.
I will be around.
Yeah, so we'll start heading towards department stuff. Thank you guys so much for being down here.
Thank you for coming to see me,
Thank you, Juanita,
guys.
for being the best and having so many insights.